Good afternoon, it is Leon here from Sofia, Bulgaria. Just came back from a workout and decided to do some work on the YouTubes and decided to check out my Odyssey channel as well. So the thing with Odyssey is that it automatically mirrors everything or just duplicates everything you have from YouTube and automatically uploads it to the Odyssey channel as well. In addition that YouTube is more and more censoring comments, something I really dislike. And you need to be on separate platforms nowadays, unfortunately. Nonetheless, I was checking the comments in Odyssey, and there is a Dutch guy who has left several questions that I basically never saw. I've never truly looked at my Odyssey because there's just so few followers. Don't really publish or don't really promote my Odyssey channel either, but this guy wants to move off grid to Bulgaria. So I once made a video about living off grid in Bulgaria that was in the southwest of the country. His first comment is a month ago asking where exactly that village was. Well, it's in the deep southwest of Bulgaria near Sandansky. He says it looks ideal for people who want to live off-grid in Bulgaria. Let me just pull up a map and figure out again where it was exactly. It was probably the most off-grid I've truly been in Bulgaria. And contrary to what you would think, the most desolate or most off-grid feeling areas are often relatively close to Sofia, so you don't need to go, let's say, to the middle of the country for that. That's a thing you should know. It is somewhere over... Where was it exactly? Now, I've gone truly deep into the country. I've been to every corner, and I make it a point to go as deep as I can. Gega, Zoicene, that's where it was. So first of all, if I zoom out, you have Sofia, which is just in the middle of the country with the western side. You move down by highway to Blagovgrad, Sandansky, Petric. You get to Gega, which is already, the road gets really rough, and then it just gets sand roads, and you get to Zoicene, which basically looks like this, and you're essentially off-grid in probably your idea of the word, let's say. Now, what are your questions exactly? He says, he asks, first of all, how did I end up in Bulgaria? He wants to find out if it's a place for him to live and have his own place in the big garden. How I ended up here is just in 2014, it was pretty hard to live in my own country. I worked at a pizza place. I've actually really struggled after I graduated. I had all kinds of menial jobs. Eventually I worked at a travel agency as a webmaster, but I felt I needed to move abroad just to expand my horizon a bit. I've done many menial jobs in the Netherlands, struggled quite a bit to make ends meet. My job as a webmaster was actually pretty good. I was in IT. I was good at it, but it somehow didn't click. It was not my thing. I felt like a bird in a cage, let's say. So what I did is I just looked for jobs abroad. Bulgaria was the first thing that came on my path. So I did a lot of research into the IT jobs that they have here. They had relatively high salaries. I started out with, 2,500 leva a month. That's nearly 10 years ago, gross, and that was increased later to 2,800 leva. Just if you divide it by 2, then you have the amount in euros. And I could easily just live off that on my own. My rent was always 300 euros a month. I lived in a very cheap but great apartment near the business park in Sofia. And I had the time of my life. So just by moving abroad, my lifestyle tripled immediately. That's how I ended up here, and eventually I went from IT into pharmaceutics. I got better and better jobs. Worked for Netherlands Cancer Institute, basically until very recently, and now I'm in this branch, and it's been very rewarding to me. So I work for the Netherlands, but from Bulgaria, and it's just very very convenient for me. What else are you asking? He's moving here for real, he says. He's looking for freedom. He's not looking for a free handout. Doesn't mind buying an old house and a plot in the middle of nowhere. Well, that's basically the only choice you have, because you won't find a true modern home for a good price in your eyes, probably. For me, it's not about the house. I live in a shitty flat in Dordrecht right now, which is in the Netherlands, but about the garden I want to create, and about not being under the boot of the state, and not being surrounded by statists, people who religiously believe the state is the highest authority and can therefore destroy, kill, and take whatever, whenever, from whomever. Well, we are not statists in the Netherlands, and then the Dutch are growing more skeptical by the day. So, statists, I don't think you need to leave the Netherlands exactly for that reason. Let's be objective. The Dutch are mostly freedom-loving people. Although you may draw your own conclusions from what you've seen over the past 2-3 years, indeed you might be at your place in Bulgaria a bit more. I could agree in that respect, but we're not statists, neither are the Bulgarians, truly. You will often see that statists, in the sense that you mean it, the state being the highest authority, you don't see that in a lot of countries, especially in Europe. We're fairly skeptical, I believe. In either case, good for you to look beyond the Netherlands. He wants to create his own permaculture garden, growing lots of healthy non-GMO fruits, veggies, nuts, seeds, flowers and herbs. Yeah, that's an excellent choice. Bulgaria has pretty good soil, in particular in the north west of the country, around the Danube, the mountains or the hills near Berkovica, Montana area have quite good soil, because also the soil is quite near the Danube River, which has its, so it is, how should I say, drained by the river, so it's not dry. The southwest is actually quite dry, might not be suitable for exactly your type of off-grid living, because in the southwest you have a different type of soil which is more sandy. Mediterranean, you'll be quite close to Greece and you can basically grow watermelons there, whereas in other parts of Bulgaria you grow tomatoes, essentially in the whole country, as long as it's not too dry. You have plenty of areas where you can grow nuts. I would say that's mostly around Sliven, where you have very good soil as well, and in the northwest near Montana. I have friends who have a sort of plantation for nuts and almonds. Almonds are very good for sale as well. They bring up a lot of money. So look into that around Sliven and Montana. These are also some of the cheaper areas in the country, at least. Sliven Jambol is not too expensive. Montana is very unpopular as well. Not many people really move there. Vratsa is quite different. It's already closer to Sofia, Vratsa, and you have more foreigners living there, especially Brits. British pensioners like the area of Vratsa for some reason. In particular, the mountains. You have the Danube close by. It is a pretty area. It's not my favorite for a living. I think it's a bit remote and not very much alive. Sliven is pretty much okay, but it really depends on the village. Contrary to popular belief, many people, they say that the northwest of Bulgaria is the most uninhabitable or the most depopulated area, which I think is not true, even looking at the numbers. Just from my experience driving through the areas, just because it is flat and accessible, northwestern Bulgaria, the villages are mostly populated. You find most houses that are just people living there. If you truly want areas that are depopulated, look into the area of Krumovgrad, Gotsa Delchev in the south. Plenty of villages around there that are even not on the map anymore because there's just no people living there. Western Bulgaria as well, the areas around Trekliano, for example. Trekliano. Look into. Let me just pull up a map. On Dragoman, even directly west of Sofia, you have these areas such as west of Pernik. You have many villages where you can live quite cheaply, still be close to Sofia, and have basically more of an off-grid feeling than you would in the complete northwest of the country. Many of these villages, and in particular those near Kustendil, another area west of Kustendil, basically all of those villages are completely abandoned. Near completely. You'll find 2, 3, 4, 5 people living there in those villages. I've been to all of them. Then they have a different row of villages here. Chudinci, for example, Rezinci, and this is all completely empty. There's nobody here. There's a train here in the valley from Juashavo to Kustendil. There's a train running, once, twice a day. But it looks completely abandoned. That's truly as off-grid as it gets in Bulgaria. And then, as I was saying, you get a pretty off-grid experience near Igralište as well. Dobri Laki, not necessarily, but in the areas around you do. There's plenty of mountain settlements where people do live and continue to live, mostly pensioners. Tsavritsa, not necessarily. Vaksevo, not necessarily, but around it, yeah. Plenty of abandoned places. You can get a house, but you just need to go there. You need to go see it. As I said, not Zlatograd, Krumovgrad is a... Where's Krumovgrad again? Somewhere. I'm overlooking it, Krumovgrad. Yeah, it's right here. Krumovgrad, surrounding areas, plenty of abandoned villages as well. Do you necessarily want to live there? I don't think so. Don't go completely off-grid. You'll have a very strange experience that you might not necessarily be ready for. I think you have some spiritual revelations as well. Bulgaria is a deeply spiritual country, and being in these places, it does something to you. You cannot just move out there and sit there and spend the whole winter there, because you either go crazy or you get to know yourself in ways that you might not be ready for. What I would do is you go to one of those villages, you take money with you, and you offer to stay at a person's place. I can't help you learn the language, but you'll have to find a way to try it first, or go stay in a guest house and spend some days with local people. Do that, and you'll see how it actually is. Gotsa-Delchev, the area has plenty of abandoned villages as well. Although, if you want off-grid, I offer you the advice to look into this area. Tserovica, let's say northwest of Kustendil, Dolno Selo. I have plenty of videos of these areas that I published about a year and a half or so ago, or 2 years, I don't know. Plenty of videos about abandoned areas. But be careful what you're doing, truly. Be careful. There's nothing there, there's no ambulance, there's no stores. I personally don't truly understand why you would do it, but it's not about me, it's about you. I'm trying to look from your perspective. I'm a city boy and I like the modern conveniences. I like the airport, I like my cappuccino. It's not for me, but I like to see it and I like to come back to the city. What else are you asking? You're saying if people are looking for houses, always check the Bulgarian cadastre so you can easily find out what kind of land or house you're buying, the roads and surrounding land where it belongs to. And then you post a link to the cadastre. Yeah, that's correct. And if you look at the cadastre, you can also buy several plots of land and later tie them together. There's lots of small plots of land, in particular around the Sliven area, and you could buy several of them, and eventually you'll be able to tile them together, and you'll have a big plot of land. You always need to look into if there's any pollution with heavy metals in the soil. That could be during the communist era. There were a lot of factories and state farms, and you don't know exactly what there has been in the surrounding area and what kind of pollutants you have in the soil and in rivers. And that's even in the modern day. If you look at the area of Pierdop Mirkovo, there's copper mines, and I don't know what type of pollution this causes. It might not be very pretty, but I would do a very good type of research into the areas where you are, see if there's any heavy manufacturing nearby, let's say, that might poison rivers with heavy metals. You'll want to look into that as well. For example, the Isker river, it seems very picturesque, but it's basically just a sewage. Like, I was in Lakatnik rafting, and one of my friends wanted to dive in, but then actually smelled the water, and it just smelled like sewage. So that's 60 kilometers away from Sofia. Some areas, they look very clean, but if you take a closer look, it is actually not that clean, despite being quite far from major cities. The country just needs to improve its waste processing, let's say, and it will come. It's a matter of time, but it's not that the country is ruined forever. But take a close look. If it looks nice and green, it doesn't mean that your place is actually clean and suitable to grow necessarily any fruits on a bigger scale, as you describe. Okay, look into that as well. I've described in my earlier video yesterday that you may want to live around the axis, which is Sofia to Sandanski, the southern axis. Then you have the eastern axis, basically Pazajic, Plovdiv, Stara Zagora, Sliven, Burgas. You have one central point here, Veliko Trnovo, and one, I would say, Plovdiv and the Revolut mountains around. And you have the coastal axis, which is Varna, Burgas. You might want to look in either of those central regions. And otherwise, it really depends what your preference is. Where would I like to live? I would like to live in Mirkovo, which is somewhere around here. I quite like that area. It's just 50 kilometers east of Sofia. I wouldn't mind living in southern Bulgaria either, but as I said, I'm a city boy. I just like to live in Sofia, and otherwise I wouldn't move out into the country. Perhaps if I was a pensioner right now, I would. I also don't have the money to buy a house, or at least a nice house. I'm not very technical. I cannot do anything with my hands, basically, except type, so I'm not... I couldn't do any renovation by myself. I know my weaknesses, and I try to avoid needing to capitalize on those. See what I mean? What else are you asking? Nothing. I think that's all. So yeah, you also want to look into having hospitals nearby. I know that it will be impossible for you to call an ambulance in a small mountain settlement. You will not speak the language. You will not be able to explain what happens. Let's say you're working with an axe and it falls on your foot. I'm just things happen, you know. You're alone. Your next neighbor might be an 80-year-old man who, yeah, he can take care of himself, but can he help you? Can you go walk to him and ask him for help? Yeah, you can scream, but you're far. Bulgaria seems like a small country, but it is a majestic country, I would say. If you look at the mountains, in some places there is no other way than you feeling very, very small. Trust me, you'll have horses walking around you, dogs walking around you of meters tall. I'm exaggerating, but you'll feel small. You'll feel vulnerable in the Bulgarian remote areas, and you are. I've seen thunderstorms chopping off trees in the middle. It just chops off a whole forest. Bulgaria is a majestic country in the sense that it's overwhelming and overpowering. It is not as picturesque as France, let's say southern France, as idyllic, let's say. It is, but it is just as idyllic, but it has a rough edge, and you need to see that rough edge before you decide to move here. So you must spend some time in those places, see the rough edge, and see if you're ready for that. And the rough edge is that if you're in such a village, you will not be surrounded by people with their little kids spending a summer there. No, it's empty where you want to go. It's empty. You'll be with a pensioner around you, a couple of 100 meters away. The person will probably die like next year, and that will be your only neighbor who's gone. There's nobody else, and there's nobody moving there. There's no Bulgarians moving back to these villages because they are too remote. So what you want, I find it a bit naive, especially if you're a first timer in Bulgaria and you don't speak the language. I'm here for 8 years and I wouldn't do it. I have doubts traveling to these areas because you're on your own. Nonetheless, I applaud you for looking into it, and perhaps you should do it if that's your calling. Who am I to say no? Like, I don't let anybody stop me, so neither should you. But be aware. Be aware. If you drop that axe on your foot, you're on your own. Okay, and it will happen because you live in a flat in Dordrecht. You haven't worked with an axe. You haven't chopped wood. I don't know, but I'm just presuming. Things will go wrong. Your roof might collapse. You might have asbestos in your house. You might not have water. Your water pipes will freeze. Your well will dry up in summer. I'm just mentioning some things that I don't like to burn my hands with. It's a stove that I don't want to touch. I know I'm not equipped to deal with the wildlife. It is something that I like to admire from a distance. I like to come there and see how the people do it. I like to learn from them, and then I retreat myself back to my city apartment and realize that I would probably die in the first 3 days that I'm on such location on my own. And that also brings me back to the tremendous respect that I have for Bulgarians, in particular those that live alone. They're typically they're women alone, because the men die relatively young here, from smoking, drinking, driving too fast. Women just get older in general. That's a global thing. Good for them, but you'll find many Bulgarian pensioners that are women, and they are doing it on their own. But I've done it for 50, 60, 70 years. They're used to it. And don't think that you can do it better than them. Don't think that you can just start living like them on day one, because sorry. Don't be naive, truly. Don't be humble when you come to these places. Be very, very humble, and be afraid. Not that you will get attacked by a bear, but be cautious. That's what I'm saying. Now that I'm mentioning this, perhaps you'd like to stay closer to Sofia. Perhaps you want to go back to the Netherlands sometime. And you can look into the Plana village as well. Quite close to Sofia, but it has a completely different atmosphere. It is quite far in the sense that you feel far from the city. It's Plana. Look into that as well. And I recommend that you stay closer to an inhabited area. I truly do. And what do you truly mean by off-grid? What do you truly mean by that? Is it not being traced by authorities? Well, Bulgarian authorities will not care about you. You register, which you should do in either case. And then what will be the exact difference between you being in a normal village near Sofia and being completely off-grid? What will be the difference? You will not be bothered in either case. I don't know if you're escaping from anything. You have a study loan you're not willing to pay off. I don't know, and I don't truly care. It's none of my business. But in that respect, I know plenty of Dutch people. Pardon me for saying that, but we don't necessarily have a good image here. Plenty of Dutch people leave because they didn't want to pay off their study loan, or they have a tax issue in the Netherlands. But Bulgaria is Europe, and if you eventually need to extend your passport, they'll figure it out. They'll just not give it to you or whatever. At some point you'll get into trouble. Don't run away from your problems because they'll always get worse. I'm just mentioning. I don't need to know any problems that you might have. Again, I don't truly mind. It's not none of my business. But I'll tell you one thing. If you truly want to live off grid in the sense that you can buy a van and park in the forest and nobody will ever bother you. There's not a soul inside. I only need to mention that in the border areas you will be checked upon. So if you live in a border area, you have border police checking you all the time. All the time. So, okay, be mindful of that as well. Let's say 20 kilometers towards the border, if you have an access road leading towards any border, you'll be patrolled and checked all the time, every day, okay? And I also I deeply condone people running away from their problems from their native country, also from the Netherlands, because Bulgaria shouldn't be a refuge for people just to come here and to go off grid and to hide from anything. It's not good. Like, I'm not saying that you are, but come for the right reasons. And you sound like you are coming for the right reasons, but I like to advise in that respect and not any other, okay? Yeah, I think that was quite insightful. At least I hope the video is long enough. So I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.